This episode is brought to you by Dave, a banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. Because when you download Dave, you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's Extra Cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Download Dave today at dave.com/Spotify. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Welcome to another episode of the Flatlander Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. I'm here with Chris today, and we're going to do the next segment of his flow chart. So, Chris, how's it going over there?
Hi, Elliot. How are you, bud?
Everything's going great. I bet you I've killed, this is probably one of the only times this season I can say I've killed more ducks than you.
That is a fact. I haven't pulled a trigger on a teal or a dove all year. I'm just way too busy.
I got 28 down so far in my
I watched a couple of videos. You guys are getting after it. I don't know where you were at, but it sounded like World War III.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
It was crazy.
I've never seen anything like that. That. It made my anxiety level go up with all the people and the shooting and the.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I'm just one of them guys. I'm just, we're lucky not to have that all around us, everywhere. But that was.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. But that's only opening days. I hate opening days, but I'm not going to sit them out. If I can flee to an area that is already open, I'll do it because I can't stand. But we were probably 300-400 yards from the closest guy.
Yeah,
so we know that area well. But it's a bad deal.
That was an insane amount of blue wings. That was crazy.
Yeah,
it looked like a lot of fun. It looked like your dad was having a ball.
Oh man, he's 79 and he only has taken those cupcake shots because he's been like that for years. He's kind of like you with the shot selection, and he is having the greatest time. He's having a good year so far.
Yeah, you did a good job with Georgie too. She was pretty excited and broke or something. You kind of got onto her and called her back and made her sit, and that was good.
Yeah, she's been creeping a little bit. This last hunt, I had to get onto her really hard too. That when she gets off her stand, she wants to creep about 2 feet where she just jumps forward.
Yeah.
It's not, but then if I'm sitting right beside her, it's just a danger issue.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to really get on her.
It's safety for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but her whining has been better, except for her honoring. When she has to honor, she whines a little bit, but her whining has definitely been better.
Yeah, I noticed her noise was down a little bit. I think that's a lot because you've put a lot more control on her over the summer. I think a lot of it's kind of helped that a little bit. But
yeah,
the one thing you need to quit doing is Georgie no, Georgie sit. Quit saying Georgie first because that's when she leaves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
She hears her name. She's like, I gotta go.
Well, I don't know if it was that video or the other one that I corrected her because I was talking to my buddy. I was like, I said Georgie's name to my friend and Georgie broke. And then I corrected the hell out of her. And she's like, oh.
Well, she technically didn't break.
Yeah. But you're right. I think I continue to struggle with over commands, too many commands.
Yeah.
And saying her name in front of them.
Yeah. You over command those dogs. It doesn't matter if you're hunting or training or at a test or where you start over commanding them, it just ends up being like white noise to them. They just kind of, drown everything out,
Yep.
But,
definitely. I appreciate the feedback.
Well, it was fun to watch them. But let's talk about the next evolution here in our flow chart, how we teaching a dog to handle here at the kennel. obviously the first step was obedience, and the second step was collar conditioning, and now the third step was force fetch, and the fourth step was three-handed casting, and now we're going to go into force to pile. And this is something that, it's obviously, now we're still in the basic program, now we're in yard work and basics. This is a very, very important step. Just like all these basic programs, these basic steps are extremely important, because these are the tools and stuff that you're going to use for the rest of this dog's life to work through some issues and some problems. And you're going to see why, why we do, some people do, force to pile right out of force fetch. But you're going to see why, when I talk about this, you're going to see why we do three-handed casting before we do force to pile. We do our force to pile a little bit different than probably most people. I know when I first started, I did it, how a lot of people do it, where they just send the dog from the side, dead bird, and they back and they nick them and say back again, and they drive them from the side. And I did that for a long time. And I was actually watching Lardy's Total Retriever material, and he would front send those dogs. So those dogs would face you, and then he would give them like a right or left back, and they would turn, and he would force them on that. And when he was talking about it, he said, that helps with flaring and stuff and leaving your side because the pressure is not from your side. And I started doing that, and I like that a lot more than just side sending and just going. Now, it may take just a little bit longer because there's a couple more steps you do, but I like them. So when we do it, and the reason why we do it the way we do it is because it really cuts down on flaring. And we talked at the end of three-handed casting about maybe doing a little bit of force on back where you have the pile of bumpers are back there 10 or 15 yards, and you give a right back, and they turn to the right, and then they're en route. You nick them and say back again. You drive them into the pile. So we were kind of hitting on that just a little bit, but now we're going into 100% force to pile, and now there is no other piles out there besides the back pile. Your over piles are gone. And this back pile, and like we talked about in the last one, it's the same exact back pile as your three-handed casting back pile. So you're going to the same location. So there's no confusion to it. Dogs need to see the bumpers, mowed grass, the whole 9 yards. And we still have them on the long lead, of course. And what we do here is we're trying to drive the dog, force the dog into the pile. So, and what I mean by that is when we turn that dog, so the reason why we do three-handed casting first is because we give a right or left back. So if you didn't do three-handed casting first, you have to side send them, because when you give a right or left back, they wouldn't even know which way to turn. They would just turn whatever way they wanted to go. So this is why we do three-handed casting first, is so we can do this form of force to pile. And what you'll do is you'll put the dog out there, just right out in front of you. It doesn't have to be very far, 10 or 15 feet. The back pile's back there, 10 or 15 yards. Put the back pile back there far enough so that you have enough time to use your e-collar en route. And how I do it is I give a right or left back, and we always do verbal at this point. So this is why when I say verbal drives, and you've heard me say that 100 times, verbal drives, and this is why, because we use a verbal back when we do this. So, and then we use pressure to force them. So when you use a verbal back, or a lot of people say big, loud overs, their dogs go straight back, is voice drives. And this is one of the reasons why it drives, because we've given pressure with it. So the dog is facing you, looking at you 10 or 15 feet in front of you. There's a back pile behind them 10 or 15 yards. You're holding the lead in your hand. And what you're going to do is you're going to go right or left back. It doesn't matter. So you give a right back, go straight up, go back. Now let that dog turn and take off running. And en route, now I don't do it right away. Don't go back, nick back right away. What I do is I let them turn all the way around, and they're driving to the pile. And when they're about 3/4 of the way to the pile, then I yell back and I give a nick or continuous nick like we talked about before, or a little small burn, and yell back again, and then drive them into the pile. So your timing has to be really, really good. You want to be earlier than later with your timing. If your timing is too late and you give collar pressure in the pile when they're, at the pile picking up a bumper, you could confuse them a little bit and make that little area kind of a little hot spot. So if you screw up in your timing, screw up a little bit earlier than later. So the sequence is back, they spin around, they take off running, and they're en route to the pile, about 3/4 of the way to the pile. You can either yell back again or you can either burn and then yell back and then let off the pressure, and it just drives them. Then it drives them into the bumpers, right? So am I making sense so far?
Yes, you are. I do have a couple questions when it's a good time for them.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, can you describe exactly what flaring is?
So flaring is when that dog turns or leaves your side, they don't go straight, they flare the line. So you have a line between you and the bumpers. That's called the line. Mm-hmm. And instead of running down that line, they flare way left or way right of the line. They have this big bow going out to the pile. Mm-hmm. And that's a flaring issue. And once that starts, it's really hard to fix. It's because then they think they're not in their head, they're not putting together that the pressure is to go into the pile. They're putting the pressure, it's in their head, they're making that area or the line hot, and they're avoiding that spot, so they're flaring around.
Okay.
Yeah. So now if you haven't force fetched your dog, if you haven't collar fetched your dog, if you haven't done any of that stuff, collar conditioned your dog, any of that stuff, you can't do this. You can't do any force. This is a part of a force program. So if you have not force fetched, collar conditioned, collar fetched, done any of that, you can't do this with pressure. You'll have to just basically run to the pile instead of forcing to the pile, right? And it's very important that you have to do all those previous steps really, really well before you do this. So, and we want to alternate this. So what you're doing is you're driving the dog into the pile. And and the reason why I do this, and I don't just, say back, let them turn and say nick and say back again. I let them turn around, get leveled out, and take off running. So they're looking right at the pile. They're going pretty good. You're driving them into the pile. If you do that a little bit too soon, when they turn, if your timing's wrong, and you go nick and you say back, and they're not all the way turned around, what they'll end up doing is you actually will cause a little bit of a flare. And what will happen is instead of them turning around quickly and driving straight back, they'll have this big loopy turn because they think that spot right behind them is the hot spot. They haven't put it in their head yet that the pressure is driving them in. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's why I wait for them to get going down the line before I give them pressure. Okay. And what you're going to do here is you're going to do that both right and left-handed. So you're going to give a right back, let them turn, let them run down the line, nick back. Same way with the left side, let them turn to the left, run down the line, nick back, and drive them into the pile. And the reason why we have that long tagline on there is a lot of times at this stage in the deal, when you see some good positive momentum, they don't have to turn and burn and dirt and mud flying. And if they do, that's great. But when a dog is trying, they've got some good momentum. They're trying. It's like determined momentum. When a dog has that and when a dog is just kind of loping along and hating life. So you're trying to get some sense of urgency into this dog to get to that pile as quickly as possible. So if your dog's got good determined momentum, you're fine. If your dog is like walking, hating life, obviously something's wrong. Revisit something, maybe turn up the pressure, turn down the pressure, whatever. So we're going to start this right and left backs. So we're going to do right back, left back, and we're going to force them into the deal. So you're going to start with your forcing pressure kind of low on the collar. And you're going to amp this up just like we did in collar fetch and in collar conditioning. And you're going to amp your collar pressure up to almost a point of failure, like we talked about, right? In force fetch and collar conditioning. And I'm not saying stay hot for a long time, but you need to turn up the pressure with them And so they realize, hey, no matter what, I have to drive through this pressure to get to the bumper.
Mm-hmm.
If you did a good job in collar conditioning and you did a good job in collar fetch, this is not going to be an issue. If you didn't do a good job in collar conditioning or collar fetch, you are about to find out. Because what ends up happening is that pressure, it gets so high, the dog worries more about the pressure than doing the actual act. Then you have not taught that dog yet how to deal with that much pressure.
So what kind of behaviors might you see?
They'll just take off. Sometimes they'll bolt. They'll leave. They'll just take off. They'll leave, or they'll go to the bumpers and just stay there. They won't pick one up, or if they'll run at the pile. And I've seen dogs run right over the top of the pile and keep going. I've seen them get to the pile, run left or run right. I've seen, you name it, any kind of avoidance behavior that you see besides them driving themselves into the pile is not what you want.
Well, how would you handle something like, let's say a dog just takes off?
That's why you have the long tag. That's why you have the long lead.
Oh, okay. So you still have the lead, right? Okay.
You still have a long one on it. So you put all of the, the dog's only 10 or 15 feet in front of you, and you have all the slack in your hand. Well, you need to wear gloves, and you have the rope in your hand, and you give a right back, and that dog spins to the right and takes off. That rope's going through your hand.
Mm-hmm.
It just open hand, That way, if the dog gets weird and tries to bolt or avoid it, you can stop and go, no, here. Now, when they do that, what I like to do is get them back over, because they're a little bit freaked out, get them back over to the pile. And what I like to do at that point is I don't really give more collar pressure at that point. Then I'll probably ear pinch them to a bumper.
Okay.
I simplify it. Listen, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. Now, if your dog starts getting really weird, really avoidance, you need to rethink what's going on. And sometimes with those dogs, it doesn't hurt at all to throw a bumper over their head like you did in three-handed casting, or teach them in three-handed casting. It takes nothing to throw that over their head and then force them like that. Force them with you throwing it. And then that kind of simplifies it as well, So, and there's some dogs too, and it's, you never know when it's really going to happen, that if you have a big pile of bumpers out there, when they get out to that big pile of bumpers, it's almost overwhelming for them. They start shopping the pile, which means they're grabbing a bumper. They can't pick one out. And that, a lot of that comes from stress, mental stress, that they can't get one, they can't figure it out. So they're getting kind of a little bit stressed out. And then what they end up realizing is the longer that they shop in the pile, they don't have to get back to you as quickly as possible and do it again. So some dogs turn into having a shopping problem where they go from bumper to bumper to bumper to bumper.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start to see that, maybe take all the bumpers away except for one and leave them no option but that one. But when you do that, you're going to have to throw that back there every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Which is fine. It's not that big a deal. And then once they realize what that needs to be done, then you can put a pile back out there and do it again. So are you following me so far, kind of how we're doing all this?
Yes, I have a philosophy question on it.
I can't wait to hear it. I'm excited.
Just what is, so you went in three-handed casting, they're already doing what you're asking them to do before you start this drill. So what's the long game? What are we trying to teach them with this?
This is going to be a tool that this will transition right into water force. You're basically doing water force without water. You're teaching them how to deal with pressure for water force. And now the end game is when you start running cold blinds or pattern blinds or whatever, and the tee, when you get to the tee, anything that you're side sending on, and we're going to get to side sending here in a little bit, but when you start side sending these dogs and they get confused, this is the tool that when you say back on a blind retrieve and they give you a no-go, they don't leave your side, this is a tool that's going to make them go.
Okay. So it's, yes, you're already doing this on your own through the 3-hand cast, but you do this every time I tell you in your whole life, no matter what. And we're going to conquer this problem right now.
Correct.
So you know that this is demanded of you.
Correct. This is when they hear back. It's almost like a compulsive behavior, like when you hear fetch.
Right.
They leave. So, and this deal here is, and you'll see some dogs really excel in this, and there's some dogs who just hate it. So you have to, and this entire time you're doing this, just like with 3-hand casting, just like with force fetch, if you've got a really, really excitable dog, you slow down. Mm-hmm. If you've got a dog that's kind of dragging a little bit, maybe you speed up and you amp it up. So you slow down with a real powerful, fast dog. So now let's just say everything's going well. You got right and left backs. They're driving the line. You're nicking. You're giving pressure. You can go up the scale on pressure, and they're even yipping and yiping maybe on the way, and you say back, and they yipe back, and they drive in the pile. They grab it. They come right back in. I usually front finish them like we talked about in 3-handed casting. I just usually front finish at this point. And let's just say your dog is doing that well. It's driving with good momentum. It's trying really hard. It's not flaring. It's understanding what's wanted. So now at this point, this is when you'll bring that dog into your side. Okay. You've established the dog understands when you give him pressure that drives them into the pile. They understand the line isn't what's doing it. They understand it's when they hear back, they drive into the pile.
Now, what would be your signal to move on? Like how many days are you going to take to progress, kind of ramp up the pressure?
Man, it all varies from dog to dog. Of course, that's the biggest thing in dog training. It all varies dog to dog. But you can get through this in a few days, probably, because especially if you've done all your homework and you've done your 3-handed casting, and maybe you force on back just a tiny little bit, but you've done 3-handed casting really well, and the dog knows exactly what. See, this is almost another form of collar conditioning. You're just enforcing already known commands. So you're doing 3-handed casting. The dog knows to turn that way. The dog knows to run to the pile. You're just kind of enforcing all that, right? You're just giving it a little bit of sense of urgency. If you've done all that well and your dog's working with you well, this only may take a few days.
Okay.
It all depends on it all depends on how good you've done 3-handed casting and force fetch and collar conditioning and all those things. As long as you're not trying to hurry through it, this doesn't take real long. To be quite honest with you.
So you're looking for straight lines and effort.
Yes, 100%. You're looking
and handling the pressure.
Yeah, they may bow out. So some of these dogs may not turn. If they're at the middle of the clock, they may not turn and run straight at 12 o'clock like an arrow. Right. They may turn and run at 1 o'clock, but then bow into the pile. Right? That's fine. I don't care. What you don't want them to do is run to 3 o'clock. You know what I mean? Like that. If they are turning and kind of running to 1 o'clock and bowing into 12 o'clock, I'm fine with that. I'm not a big, huge stickler on them, turning and running straight back like a perfect little arrow. Then you start getting into the, fine hair stuff, and it's you can nitpick them to death. You're just looking for good, positive momentum, and they're trying really hard. Mm-hmm. So now that's all going really well. Now you're going to move them into the side. You're still on the long lead. You put them into the side. They're looking at the pile. At this point now, I like to throw a bumper out in the pile. Just say, hey, this is, we haven't really done this yet, so this is what I want to do. And I don't usually go through the big routine of, dead bird, good, right there, or line, or whatever everybody says. I don't really get into all that yet. That's coming down the road, because sometimes what will happen, and I've seen it 100 times, is some of the more sensitive dogs that have more avoidance issues. Have you ever seen a dog when you say dead bird or something, whatever your cue is for a blind, they start getting nervous? Have you ever seen anything like that?
No.
Okay, what happens? But and what happens is with those dogs, as soon as they hear dead bird, they're like, oh man, here we go again. They start getting nervous because they know they're getting ready to run a blind retrieve that's had some mental stress to them. So that those voice commands already, those cues already make them nervous. So what I like to do here is I'll just have them lined up at the pile, and I'll just throw a bumper in the pile, and I'll have them looking out there, and I'll drop my hand and I'll give them a second. I'll say back, and I'll just let them run, and I'll let them give them some free runs to establish the pile. Let's let them run to the pile. And then now this is fun. We're just running to the pile. And then once they've got that right, throw another bumper in the pile, drop your hand, give them a second, and say back. Now, this is where you're going to do a force to pile from the side send. It's the same exact process as the front send. It's the same spot, basically, about 3/4 of the way there. You're going to do a little burn, and you're going to say back again. You're going to drive them into the pile. And this is going to go really, really quick if you've done everything right. This is very, 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 very easy at this point. But you notice we're not doing a back, nick, back right from my side. I'm not going back, nick, back, and I'm not causing that hot spot. Like when you see a lot of these dogs that when they flare, this is where you're going to see a flare is right here. Mm-hmm. Is when you side send them, and if you always are going back, nick, back as quickly as possible, instead of running straight, they'll flare left or right away from that spot. This is why I drive them into the pile about 3/4 of the way there. We try to do everything in our power not to start the flaring, because once it starts, it's a pain in the butt to fix. And
you said this is about 15 yards?
Yeah, it's 10 or 15 yards, just not very far at all.
Yeah,
not very far at all. So once this starts, and don't force them on every single send. Force them 1 every 3 sends, 2 every 3 sends, or whatever. I don't usually do it every send. But I do start amping the pressure up like we did in the front finish send. I do start amping the pressure up. Now what you're going to do, though, here is you're going to start backing up, right? You're going to start backing up. And I get back to maybe 50 yards. I get back. I don't go back real far. I get back to about 50 yards. And then when you start moving back, they may start getting a little bit weird, but I'm still moving back. I'm still sending them. I'm still kind of forcing them about 3/4 of the way back. But let's just say I get back to about 50 yards. Now we don't run the double tee, and we'll get into that in a couple podcasts, but this is about the distance of my tee is about 50 yards. So now we're at the beginning. When we stop doing force to pile, we're about the beginning of where the tee starts, right? So now what we're going to do here is when we start sending them, we're going to force a different. So some people force only like in the tee, the intersection of the tee. Some people only force as soon as you send them. I force up and down the entire line. And that way I don't ever try to cause a hot spot of a certain location on the line so that dog flares that location. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So now we're back about 50 yards. Back. They take off running. They get about 3/4 of the way there. Nick back again. Burn back, whatever you want to do. Come back. Now maybe you do your burn at halfway to the pile. It's the same sequence. Now, guys, ladies, when I say burn, I'm not taught that all burn is a verbiage for continuous pressure. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. Continue. It could be 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever the dog needs to get them their momentum going. So when I say burn, it's just continuous. So let's just say now you're going to side send them back. Everything's going well. They get to about halfway there. Burn back and let them run. Okay. Then give them a couple free runs. Now maybe we're still not, burning from our side. We're still halfway there. We're 25 yards away. So now let's just say now we want to do it about 1/4 of the way into it, 10 or 15 yards out. Back, burn, back. Now let them run. Now if you see them maybe losing their momentum or their determination or whatever, like 3/4 of the way there, because what sometimes will happen is you'll say back, then you'll burn, and you'll say back, and then they'll take off hauling butt, then they'll get about 3/4 of the way there, and then they start slowing way down, like kind of almost like an avoidance of the pile, if that makes sense. Then you can even do a burn back and drive them back in there again because they know better. And see how we're working from the pile to us with the pressure?
Right.
So now we're all the way to us. So now is when I do my back, burn, back. So back, burn, back. and get them going. We have established the line up and down the line with pressure. Hopefully they're not flaring anyway, and now they're to us. And then at the very end is when we start side sending them from my side, because I think when we do that, I think we avoid a lot of flaring issues, and I think we avoid a lot of confusion issues in the dog's mind about what is required of them.
Right.
A lot of people think forced to pile is getting them to drive away from your side and get away from you as fast as possible. They think it's getting away from you. It's in my mind, it's actually getting to the bumper faster. Mm-hmm. It's running to the bumper faster with more determination. It's not running away from you. It's running to the bumper. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's why I force and I drive them into the pile instead of forcing them away from my side until the very end. It's a little bit of a different philosophy, but it's worked really well for me over the years. I really like the results. I like the stable responses that I get. Now, it may take a little bit longer than if you just start from your side and back and off you go. But I think in the long run, I don't think it takes much longer because you don't flaring and some avoidance issues and some confusion that doesn't pop up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if they flare, then you just shorten the distance and
go back and simplify. It's very simple, and that's why I also force up and down the entire line, and I don't force in certain locations, like set locations, because I want them to know that, hey, this entire line is fine, not just that one little spot. And if they start flaring, let's just say they start flaring, and you say back, they go way left, and they go out way left, and they flare away. Then, you've done, slow down a little bit. Now move forward, past the flare, maybe throw a bumper in the pile, give a couple free runs, maybe force a little bit, go back to where you're at, maybe give them a couple free runs or throw a bumper, up into the pile, send them through the flare, let them, hey, that spot is okay. That spot's okay. Don't worry about it. Maybe back down on the pressure a little bit and send them. What I don't like to do, and I've done it before, I really, really, really don't like to do it, is sometimes there's people out there think that when you see flaring, you actually add pressure and you drive them through the flare spot. I've done it. I've actually done it. It's actually worked, but I don't like doing that. I do everything in my power not to add more pressure to a flare because they're flaring from pressure, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I really don't like to do that. And if you start to see some big flares, you can do a number of things. You can put a chair out there. You can do anything you want. You put a holding blind. You can do anything you want to do to that flare spot. You just kind of put objects in the way of that flare spot so they can't really flare around it, like a chair, maybe a holding blind that's, kind of going away from you, like a wall, so to speak. But I really hope you don't have to do that. Now, if your dog is running the line and you say back and they're running 2 or 3 feet left or right of the line, who cares? That's not a big deal.
It's got to be fairly exaggerated.
Exactly. It's got to be like if you're going at 12 o'clock and you say back and they flare out to 3, 2.5, 3, and they blow way in like that. Yeah. That's very, you see that. That's when you're like, okay, hold on a second. What do we got going on? But if they're just running 2 or 3 feet left or right of the line, it ain't a big deal. And in our handling field behind the kennel, for 20 years of doing this, I have a groove. It's bad. It's almost a foot down. There's a groove from doing this. Yeah. And Andrew and Julie have actually moved the force to pile line and the tee and all that stuff, because that I would do it going north and south, and that groove is so bad. If it rains or something, it's just a mud. It's mud. So they've moved the line to go east and west. So they moved that, which whatever, they're doing it. So if that's what they want, I don't care. Right. But so many dogs have run that. And when I first started doing this, it's funny. when I first started doing this, I lived in a city in Nebraska, and I would do this in the park. And I had a handful of dogs I was training at the time, and I would do it in the park. And I ended the park maintenance guys. They're like, "Hey, can you do that someplace different?" I had a freaking groove in the park down to the trees. It was hilarious. I'm like, "Yeah, I can move it. It's fine."
I thought maybe you said, if you don't like it, tough.
Yeah, at that time I really didn't say that, but they were kind enough to let me do it without, you have to be unleashed, all the leash
Right.
all that.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. But, so that's basically your forced to pile. And you're going to see some weird behavior here. You're going to see maybe they don't want to look at the pile. They don't want to look at it. They're avoiding it. They're avoiding the work. If that's the case, you just got to figure it out. You either move up or you throw a bumper into the pile so that they see it and go. You have to figure out, there's no set way to make them quit bugging. And one thing I have noticed is some dogs, when you start doing this, the second you put your hand down, they look up at your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a form of avoidance when it comes to doing this stuff. So you put your hand down, they look up at your hand. What you don't want to do is start sending them with them looking at your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So
you got your hand over the top of their head like you're going to send them.
Like we normally send on the blind or a mark.
Look up.
And they'll look straight up at your hand. They won't even look where they're going. They just look up at your hand.
Right.
So you don't want that to start as a habit, and I'm going to tell you why. Because everything I say, I've done. I used to have this big dog. I used to have this dog named Jake. He was the baddest SOB around, and his name was Jake. He was Grand Hunter Retriever champion. He was a master hunter. He was the first dog in Nebraska to run that SRS Crown Championship, the whole 9 yards. And this dog was a phenomenal animal, beautiful. Anyway, I think I've talked about him on here before. But what he would do when I did forced to pile with him, I was pretty inexperienced at the time, and I would put my hand down, and he would look up at my hand, and I would send him. But it was a crazy, and he did that in forced to pile. He did it in T, he did it in everything. And I just kind of let him do it because he was doing such a great job. Well, when he got older, the second I put my hand down on anything, a 50-yard mark, a 400-yard mark, a blind, he'd look up at my hand, and I would send him, and he would take off. Mm-hmm. I could never, ever, ever, ever get that away. I could never fix it. But in his defense, it didn't matter. As long as I had his body lined up, that's where he went. Even though he wasn't looking straight out, I would put my hand down, and he would look up. I would send him. He would drop his head, and he would go exactly where I had him pointed. It was the damnedest thing you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And it was hilarious because when, everybody thought it was so cute and hilarious when we were on the SRS, like, oh my God, here comes Jake. Look at him go. He's not even looking. And people thought it was the greatest thing ever. Because, it was kind of cute. This 80-pound monster of an animal, it's almost like a permission. Like he's looking up like, let's go. And I would kick him off. And then that's what it ended up being. But if I could have avoided that issue and fixed it, I would have, because it caused me some problems. It caused me some wins at the SRS back in the day, because in the really, really tight setups, I couldn't really find lining because I couldn't get him to look at that perfect little spot that I needed him to look at. Now, he did a phenomenal job. He would go where I tell him to go. But I wish I had that little bit more of fine lining and fine tuning that when I did that, it took that away. So if that makes sense. So if that starts happening in forced to pile or any of your pile work, get your hand out of there, let them look straight out, and kick them off. Mm-hmm. And you can always add your hand back in there for lining and stuff when you start like wagging wheel and all that stuff. So because all that is when they look at your hand, that's an avoidance issue. So be careful with that. And if that's happening, just get your damn hand out of there. It doesn't really matter at this point. Okay. And that's why I also like to do, like I said earlier, just saying back instead of doing dead bird. Good, right there. I just say back because when we start doing dead bird and all that good and looking out there, I start that in a wagon wheel and stuff. So I don't associate, dead bird with in their mind at this point in their life, a bad word. Because there's some dogs that just despise pile work and yard work. And when they hear, and if you're not doing a good job with them, or if you've got one of them dogs, and when they hear dead bird, a lot of these dogs will be like, oh, shit. They'll look down, they'll look sideways, they'll look up. They're like, here it comes, here it comes. They start getting really nervous because that word just sets them off.
Mm-hmm.
So I introduced the cues for a blind retrieve later in life, like during, wagon wheel stuff when it's no pressure. It's more fun than anything.
Right.
But you got anything at all on your force to pile? I mean, I know that's kind of a quick version of it, but and I'm not going to tell you how long it's going to take. I don't know. I just know you need to really do a thorough job of it. You need to, all these basics that we're talking about, all this yard work stuff, you need to be very, very thorough. And if you see, and you need to move up the scale of pressure and then back down up the scale. You almost have to get, like force fetch, like we talked about, you almost have to get to the point of failure, drive them through that point, and then they're like, I got it. I understand. Because at some point in their life, I guarantee you it's going to happen, on land blind, water blind, or whatever, they've been corrected out there or anything like that. If you don't have this tool where you nick, heel forward, and send to get them to go no matter what, you're going to be in real big trouble. And especially if you do a lot of, and I wish I did more of it. I wish I did more of this stuff, but I just don't. You do a lot of the no-no drills where you jump into logs and pipes and stuff. And people think no-no drills are for, jumping stuff. And they are. It teaches a dog to jump things and go straight. But what a no-no drill is teaching a dog to go as sent. And there's a question that we're going to talk about this later. And what a no-no drill is basically is you put a log out there, a pipe, and you send them, and then they flare left. And you go, no here. You send them again. They flare right. No here. Move up, send them. And what ends up happening is once you start going no here, no here, no here, eventually the dog doesn't even want to leave because it doesn't know where to go, because it doesn't want to jump the pipe or the log. So now you have force to pile where you go nick, you heel forward, and you go back. Now they have to go. Have you ever got that into Georgie when you've really, on blind retrieves, where she would no-go you because you got no here, then she doesn't know where to go, so she just sits there.
The only time that she's no-good me was I was doing work at her cheating the bank, and she kept bowing in towards the bank, and I was really getting on the pressure, and finally she was just like, for 2 days, she's like, I'm done. I guess she just didn't understand what she was doing wrong or something, but that's the only time I've had issues.
Correct. And so this force to pile, and when we get into water force, this is the tool to stop that. This is the tool that, like, listen, you don't have a choice. You have to go.
Yeah.
And this is the tool for that. So be very diligent when you do this because it's a major, major part of a force program. And I'll be quite honest, and this doesn't have to be a bad thing. It just doesn't have to be, take your time with it. Make sure you're doing a thorough job. Amp up the pressure, lower it down. And so, there's some dogs that it's like love this stuff. It's the craziest thing. And there's some dogs that hate it. Most of the dogs that hate it in my career have been Chesapeakes. For some reason, Chesapeakes hate drill work and the monotony of it and like forcing them to, but they have to do it. And we get through it, not a problem. But a lot of times Chesapeakes hate this stuff. There's a dog that I'm training right now. One phenomenal dog was on the video you shared last week, Indy. Owned by Darren Toff.
Right.
And Indy's a beast. She's a 45-pound beast of an animal. And you should see her to this day at a hunt test. She loved this part of her life and drill work and force to pile. She thought it was the funnest stuff ever with pressure and everything. She's like, I got it. Woohoo, I'm running. This weekend we're running a master test, and she obliterated this master test, but we're getting ready to run a water blind in the third series. And I'm just like lining her up, and I'm not even saying anything to him. I'm just like, here, I'm lining her up, and she broke on the damn blind retrieve.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I called her right back. It was no big deal. And we passed because I didn't send her. But she loves to do this so much that when we did Forced to Pile, we literally had to hold her from breaking because she thought it was fun.
Right.
It's like she's 4 now, and to this day she does that. So, but this is a really, really good tool. It's actually a pretty simple process. The biggest thing is timing. Keep your timing really good. Like I said, I like to force in route 3/4 of the way and start coming back towards you. Whatever you do, don't try to put any force or any pressure, any collar pressure in the actual pile of bumpers. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, with that being said, the only time I really do that is when dogs start shopping and they get in there and it's an avoidance issue where they start looking for bumpers to pick up. And what I do with that is if it comes to be a problem, what I do with that, I put the collar on real low pressure. And I know a lot of people will go fetch and they'll nick them on a fetch to pick up whatever they're picking up. I don't like that because that's what they're kind of doing anyway. I like to use the command here. So I use indirect pressure on here for them to, hey, you need to make up your mind right now, pick up a bumper and get back to me as quickly as possible. So I use collar pressure or low collar pressure on here, indirect pressure instead of a fetch if they're shopping. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, Georgie's a bumper shopper. It's super annoying.
Yeah.
She did it on a teal on one of the first hunts where she dropped one and went to the other one.
She
Didn't
switched.
make her very happy. Yep, she switched.
Yeah.
Made me. I got onto her pretty good on that one.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, that teal hunt, I tell you, the way you guys do it, if Flash would explode out, that's chaos. I mean, that's oh my God.
But we were keeping it pretty controlled. We don't just shoot birds all over the place. Like, we shoot the birds, we clean up the birds, we bring them back, and we reset.
You guys did a really good job of your buddy's dog. I can't remember the dog's name was.
Stella, right?
Stella, yeah. You guys did a good job working together, and who's. But
yeah.
But that is basically Forced to Pile in a nutshell. And it's about the easiest way I can explain it. But it's a lot of everybody needs to understand. A lot of this force work is a lot of touch and feel, read and react, watch the dog's body language, watch the dog's attitude. Sometimes you got to amp up the pressure. Sometimes you got to take it off. Sometimes you get more free runs and less free runs. You just have to watch the dog, and you can read this stuff in a book all you want. But once you start doing force work, it's a real art. And the people that are really, really good at it are fun to watch because they'll be, oh, my dog's going to shut down. And then they push them through it, and they just keep going. And the next thing you know, they're done. They're like, how the hell did you do that? And it's just one of them things that you get good at it over years and touching hundreds and thousands of dogs. But the biggest is just have patience on this whole deal.
Yeah, keep your calm. Your frustration and your anger has no place in it. When I turned the corner, because my first 2 dogs I didn't really try to train that much, but I had a much less patience. And with Georgie, once I finally realized that when she's not doing it right, it's my fault. It's stuff that I have done wrong throughout the process. That allowed me to not get mad at her because I never really got that. It's like, if she's screwing up on this drill, it's because I either progressed her too quickly or did a poor job on previous things. And that helped me diffuse my frustration.
Yeah, for sure. And then, and just like you said, keep your emotions and your frustrations out of this as much as you possibly can, because that is not going to be good for anybody or anything involved. And when you're doing Forced to Pile and all this stuff, when a dog is not giving you effort. If a dog is not giving you effort, then you add pressure. If your dog is confused, then you teach. But if you've done your collar conditioning, your force fetching, your 3-handed casting, your collar fetch, if you've done all these things correctly, this really is not this is a very simple step. It really is. But like I said earlier, get to the point of failure a little bit, push through that point, back off, and then they're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to die. It's going to be fine. And I'm going to tell you, if you keep doing this with your dog throughout this process, then when you get to go start doing the big boy stuff, they accept those challenges a lot better because they've been challenged their entire life up to that point. So they accept these challenges. The dogs that have never been challenged and have been taught to accept the challenge and push through the challenge, when they get to the big boy stuff, they just crumble. And because they don't know how to deal with it, they just don't know how to deal with it. But that's all I got on Force to Pile.
All right. Well, great. If you're listening to this, guys, and you want to continue in these conversations, make sure you join us on the Facebook group, which is the Flatlander Kennels Podcast Facebook group, where we will post all the episodes there. So if you have questions, follow-up questions to what Chris is saying, you can put them in the comment section. In fact, we're about ready to record another episode. We're just going through Q&A questions and getting caught up on it. So make sure that you join us over there. Also, if you want to see Georgie's hunts, my YouTube channel is Freelance Duck Hunting, where I post all my hunts, and Georgie is certainly well displayed in those videos. And my other podcast is the North American Waterfowler Podcast. So if you're a podcast listener, check that out. Chris, I was thinking we probably need to get you on for a segment on the North American Waterfowler Podcast.
We should do that.
That would really help.
We'll talk at dog training. We'll talk hunting.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'm in for that.
Let's set that up sometime. But yeah, great job. That's great information. Learn stuff every time. I can tell you the next time that I have a dog to train, I'm going to be going back through all of these episodes. I think the audio long form is way better than 20-minute videos, personally.
I think so. And I think once we get our YouTube going and put everything together, I think it's going to be a really good stack of material.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Elliot. We'll get ready to do another one here. Thank you, everybody. See you at the line. Take that in.
Gotta strike this chord with the